It was the beginning of the 20th century. New York City was filled with immigrants from all over the world. People from each country tended to live in their own area of the city. It was in one of these ethnic neighborhoods that a great artist was born. Willie Paint showed great artistic promise as a child. At first, he drew primitive stick figures. He also had the childish habit of never allowing anyone to photograph his face, an eccentricity he maintained for the rest of his life. When he began his formal art training after high school, his unique style finally began to crystallize. Among his early works is this portrait entitled "Man Standing Straight Up." His spare style masks the enormous tension in the figure. Within a few years, he married, and he entered a more joyous period of his early career. This is reflected in the whimsical nature of this next work, entitled "Man Standing Straight Up with a Smile." Unfortunately for Willie, his career interfered with his personal life. He and his wife were divorced, and he went into his so-called blue period. His art reflected his dissatisfaction with life. His famous "Man Standing Almost Straight Up with a Frown" brilliantly captured the darker side of life and played off his earlier smile painting. During this period, Willie often was found brooding by the sea. After a while, he decided he needed a change of scenery. He, like so many artists before him, moved to Paris. There he saw other ways of life. This led to a transient phase of painting, his so-called beret phase. Note in this work, "Man Standing with a Funny Hat," that the enigmatic mouth, which symbolically is parallel to the beret, underscores his acceptance of life, whatever it may bring. What came next was quite unexpected. Willie, approaching early middle age, chose to defy convention and become quite experimental. This next work, which he named "Hey, Look at My Hair," signaled that no style was too radical for this maturing artist. This new outlook allowed Willie to see things in different ways. Inspired by Picasso, he attempted abstract art. Perhaps the most famous of his works from this period was his "Hey, Look at My Man Now." This painting showed just how unencumbered his artistic vision had become. Willie occasionally was seen in public during this phase. Still shy, he became interested in experimenting by redesigning paintings from the past that seemed to beckon to him. His first attempt in this direction was the very famous "Man with an O Mouth." In comparison with "The Scream" by Edward Munch, one can see that Willie's work is much more subtle and rich. Fame, however, was not hard for Willie to handle. Few people actually knew what the artist looked like. While continuing to interpret great artists of the past, he rendered his view of El Greco paintings. In this work, "Long Man," one can see that in contrast to an El Greco painting, Willie is not simply painting a long, thin figure. He is creating a stretched effect that goes well beyond mere imitation. Willie was now getting into his later years. Perhaps the most famous portrait of him was painted by an artist friend. In this portrait, we can sense that Willie realized that he only had so many paintings left to create. This realization was reflected in the work "Man Standing with a Wavy Mouth." One can see that Willie knew that he must resolve his uncertainty. One can also intuit that there had to be one great final painting from this artist. Willie's last work is the one that defined both his worldview and his career. Just as rosebud was the word that defined the meaning of life to Charles Foster Kane, his painting, "Man Standing Up Straight 2, tells us all that we cannot go too far from our roots. It also recalls the famous line from T.S. Eliot, "And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time."